First of all, thank you very much for having me. My name is Eric Warner. I run a company called We Are Busybodies, which is a record label and management company. But I've worn a lot of hats over the years and continue to as We Are Busybodies. I was a concert promoter for over 20 years. I ran a festival called the Over the Top Festival. I've worked for a number of different record labels, and I have also built brand programs for Nike, Pepsi, Visa, all tied back to music. And dating myself, when people used MySpace, if people remember that, which you probably don't, because you're probably 18 or 19. I used to head up entertainment, so it's just to highlight the fact how quickly the music industry is evolving, as well as social media. So yeah. See, it's really tricky, and it's largely, I think, dependent on where you are situated. Because, like, for me, myself, I'm in Toronto, and when I started out, and again, dating myself almost 20 years ago, there were a lot of inexpensive halls, clubs, you name it, to rent and to do it yourself. And for myself, like, I learned by trial and error. I talked to other promoters, and I learned, the steps along the way. But what I also thought was really amazing, and what still exists everywhere, I think, in Canada, is there's lots of um, suburban opportunities, be it in rec centers or even clubs. But I found that there were always really great networks and ways to trade shows. Like at one point, there were companies that solely existed, it seemed, to have battles of the bands, and a lot of bands got their starts that way, simply because, to your point in question, it's hard to navigate, and it's really hard to have you know, as a teenager or maybe even early 20s or beyond, sometimes be taken seriously. Like, how many people are you going to bring out? Are those people of age? Are they going to buy alcohol, which, sustains in a lot of clubs? There's a lot of variables at play that, are very impacting in terms of how it works. But going back, like for me, I found it was a lot of, emailing, calling, networking, and trading. It really is difficult, in larger cities like Toronto, especially as a young person, because there aren't that many clubs anymore, COVID or not. And it is, I think, more challenging to be able to figure out how to do some of these things on your own accord. Um, but a lot of it really comes back to, I guess, ingenuity and a desire to figure it out. I mean, this is how so many bands sustain themselves. I mean, especially pre-internet days, like calling people,
Sure.
writing letters to people. Like it's the whole Fugazi and Discord model, or DOA, or you name it. Like when I've booked a ton of tours for artists all across the country, just as much as I manage artists that have agents. In either case, it comes right back down to relationships and treating people how you want to be treated, because it's really disheartening to play a concert to two people. You can chalk it up to experience and practice, but sometimes those two people multiply into more and more people. And every band at every stage has played to two people, and it's sometimes I gotta say, in luck of the draw, like who you're working with, what the team is behind you. But everyone starts out somewhere, and you have to have those aspirations of wanting everything. But there's a lot of hard work that comes with it, and I think that sometimes is not necessarily considered the same way. Like I've toured, and it's been great. I've even toured with you, Ben, and it's been even better because it's you. Um,
Thanks.
but it's not without its challenges. So I think being a musician, again, and I'm sorry if I'm rambling, is really amazing, and there's a lot of ways to grow, but you have to be willing to accept help and to give help. And I think that there's kind of a happy medium in between. I think it can be at a number of different stages. Like sometimes, your songs are together. You think you have the pieces, like to make a go of it, but you don't have the wherewithal. But those are situations that sometimes come up from being in another band and having some experiences and again relationship based. But I do feel that there are a lot of bands that preemptively have management, and that management may not necessarily have the relationships or wherewithal to help further a career. Maybe a friend who just is a great champion, which again is a great thing, to have those champions, to have people that want to be supportive. But I would say that when you need a manager when you can't do it yourself anymore, or you don't have, and that may mean your shows are getting bigger and better. You have challenges that you're facing where you don't have capacity yourself, like the hours in the day to do it anymore.
Mhm.
Or you feel like you've taken it as far as you can go. But usually I would say a lot of the time, a manager or even agents will approach an artist based on the awareness, maybe the ticket sales, the online presence now of what an artist is developing or cultivating, because that's really important. And I mean, as a promoter, I love booking bands specifically that I wanted to see. Like when you work with an agent, you typically end up booking most of their roster as you build the relationship. And a lot of the bands I used to love booking, no matter what I would do, would bring out 40 people, just as much as I put on shows with thousands of people. But what I'm getting at is um, sometimes there's a need for a team behind you. Sorry, I don't know if you hear some background noise, but I think I hear my kids running around. But anyways, what I'm getting at is um, it's a really a fine line of when you need someone. Like I really don't think that there's a tried and true formula. And
Sure.
I've been approached by bands either to release their records or manage them. And for me, it's all relationship based. Yes, people will solicit based on their roster,
Mhm.
based on their personal experience, and I think every conversation is worth having. But I really think that, and the point I was getting at is there was a period where because of the power of social media and DSPs and everything, like you could have like 2 million streams, but the artist had typically played to 40 people before. There's a huge disconnect, I feel, right now, sometimes between even streaming numbers and where an artist is at. Not that they can't correlate together or grow together over time,
Mhm.
but I really think that when you can't do it yourself or you don't want to do it yourself because there's too many good things happening,
Mhm.
then you need management. And there's a ton of great artists that manage themselves
Yeah.
to this day that have done it for their entire career. See, it's really interesting now, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying with you can be an artist that uploaded a few songs to SoundCloud or to different DSPs, and all of a sudden everything blows up overnight. And those instances happen. It's rare, but it does happen enough that people are using it as case studies or models. Um, it's challenging because like I'm saying this as a guy who runs a label, but you know you can do it yourself, and I think more than ever you can do it yourself using platforms like TuneCore, I guess like DistroKid, CD Baby from the DSP standpoint. And typically, a lot of bands sell the majority of their albums either online, physically or digitally,
Right.
or off stage.
Mhm.
But I think that there's an important part that comes in with a record label. Like a record label, depending on how they operate. Like for myself, like when I'm signing a band and putting out a release and commit to a global release, I'm paying for publicity. I'm paying for radio trackers. So that means people soliciting songs to either college radio or commercial radio. I'm likely hiring publicists in multiple countries. I'm paying for digital advertising. I'm paying for the manufacturing of CDs or vinyl. For me, it's typically vinyl. Then there's freight costs involved, and there's mechanical royalties, and the list kind of goes on and on depending on you know what the requirements are for the different types of artists. So, like for me, like I have global physical distribution and digital distribution, and I sell a lot of records physically
Mhm.
every single month between my distributor and my personal label web store and Bandcamp. I think a label, offers artists the ability to kind of bridge their personal experience. Maybe they have, again, a manager, as you pointed out, with the ability to maybe take it to a new level. And it doesn't mean, you're signing to Warner or Universal. It could be, and I'm using Canadian context, but like Dynalone or Paper Bag, and these are all great labels with great infrastructure. But there's a lot of artists that do it on their own, that then form their own labels and help other artists. Like You've Changed Records, started by Steve from the Constantines and Baby Eagle and Dana Romano, and now they put out lots of other great acts as well. And I think that's how a lot of labels end up starting up. Like Royal Mountain was started by Colorado. Like my label started to put out my old band's first or final release, and then it kind of grew from there. I think that's again, so many labels now that I think about it. Um, but yeah, like I think that not every artist wants a label or needs a label. It just depends on how they want to operate. You can press your own records. It's easier than ever before. You can do all these things, but there certainly is a benefit to the power of publicity and having an infrastructure, to support you. Again, it doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. It doesn't mean you're not going to get lost in the shuffle of things as so many bands do. I think it's, you're kind of picking your own poison. Like, could be good, could be bad. Um, but some bands you want to take those risks, and I've also had really horrible experiences for the bands I manage, and I've had to fight to get their rights back, and I've done it successfully a few times, because you never know what you're getting into, which is also why contract law and having a really good entertainment lawyer and really trying to understand what your trajectory as a band is, like what are your short-term and long-term goals. All of that I think kind of ties back into like, why do you need a label, why do you need a manager, why do you need a booker, how do you want to do things. Like, you're gonna like go through experiences, and
Yeah.
you're gonna figure out what you need. And ultimately a lot of labels are going to either approach artists because they see an opportunity, or you're going to cold solicit or have your manager solicit. Like as a manager, I reach out to labels all the time. um, but I like, as my own label, I typically don't like, I accept submissions, but I run a very biased operation of what I put out, what I like, and it's across genres. Hmm. And I mean, I think you make it's a really good question. I think coming up with a strategy and understanding who the band is and the band's voice is really important, because you're right. Like, I mean, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and depending on where you are in the world as well, like so many different other platforms as well, like Weibo in Japan, sorry, China, and so on and so forth. It's I think it's first figuring out who you are, who your identity is, who you're targeting, and how you're going to approach it, because you want to have consistency, and you want your fans to. I mean, first of all, it all comes back to the music. If you have good music and it's engaging and you can connect with an audience, that's going to afford you all the abilities to have all the other conversations and to have those interactions and those personal experiences. But when you get to that point and you kind of like started figuring out your different platforms, it's having some sort of consistency throughout. It doesn't mean that you have to have uniformity between all of the content, because it doesn't work that way. I mean, for example, like TikTok, you're looking at very short videos targeted to a younger demographic. I mean, older demographics too, but primarily younger demographic. You're not going to have like a stationary image or even like a short video like you would maybe on Facebook. Whereas Instagram, again, you're looking at different types of content with some overlap. To me, it's really about um, again, figuring out ways to connect, to show your personality, to show to have that human connection, because otherwise it's just like a random steady stream of content which may not connect or resonate with any of the core audience or a limited segment of it. I really think that it's challenging, because again, now you're all of a sudden catering to so many different platforms, and some artists may realize, like, I don't know. I'm just randomly choosing a band like Young La Tango. May not work on TikTok because of their age, their audience, and their sound. Whereas, perfectly is fine on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter in terms of a content standpoint. Whereas if you're I'm even like, and I'm dating myself because this is not even as current, but like Lil Yachty, you know, still works on TikTok, or like Lil Uzi Vert or something like that. That's going to work way better on a certain platform than another. And I think a lot of artists, their management, their labels, are all consciously aware of how they're targeting things, even because you can generate a ridiculous amount of revenue from streams derived even from some of these platforms. So I think that, like, again, it kind of goes back to what is your engagement strategy, and I think it goes way deeper than just who your audience is and how you're trying to talk to them and how you're trying to connect. A lot of it goes down to, like, when you're doing that, there's probably, depending on the level you're at, there's a whole bunch of strategists and like um, digital influencers or like social media people behind a lot of these different accounts too.
Yeah.
Not always, because it comes down to money and cost and time, but it's really interesting how, like, something is so carefully crafted and cultivated, or seemingly so, but how much work has gone into it.